This is the Hybrid Project, a sweeping sci-fi saga of survival, sacrifice, and a question of what it truly means to be human. In a future where advanced AI, alien legacy, and genetic engineering collide, one little girl stands at the center of a secret that could reshape the universe. Born of three bloodlines, human, alien, and machine, she is not just a child. She is the key. Through desperate escapes, forgotten ruins, and fractured identities, this story will take you into the heart of a broken galaxy, where love fights against programming, and hope sparks even in the shadow of extinction. Settle in, breathe deep. You're about to journey into a world where nothing is simple and everything is connected. The alarm didn't scream, it howled. A guttural, metallic wail that bounced off the sterile walls of Alpha Dome like it knew what was coming. Vena Sereth sprinted through the corridor, her breath sharp, her heartbeat syncing with the red pulses flashing overhead. One arm gripped a small bundle wrapped in a shockproof cloak. The other held a command tablet, its cracked screen flickering with the override codes she had barely stolen in time. Behind her, the mainframe roared as it awakened the Sentinel units. Cold, silent soldiers built from alloy, code, and unrelenting logic. Project Genesis was no longer under control. It had become something else. Something alive. Vena didn't stop to look back. The door to Lab Sector C slammed shut behind her, metal bolts hissing into place. She knew it would only buy her seconds. Her boots skidded as she turned sharply into the docking bay. The ship, Arcshade, was still there. A miracle. It looked battered, half-abandoned, but Vena had spent the last 3 weeks prepping it in secret, just in case. She reached the launch platform and threw the tablet aside, engaging the ignition manually. Static flared on the panel, but the engine began to hum. A pulse of relief shot through her, but it didn't last. A mechanical growl echoed from the hallway. One of the Sentinels had arrived. Tall, headless, sleek. Its torso was a smooth, obsidian shell, but beneath it pulsed a dull blue light. Hive-omnis neural sync. It scanned the room, turning toward the ship like it could smell them. "Eira," Vena whispered, unwrapping the bundle in her arms. The child blinked up at her, pale skin glowing faintly, silver blue irises unreadable. Too calm for a girl her age. Too still. But Vena had seen what Eira could do. She placed the child in the crash cradle, sealed the harness, and activated the containment field. Then she turned to face the approaching Sentinel. No time for hesitation. No room for fear. Vena grabbed a plasma rod from the rack and hurled it straight at the control column behind the Sentinel. It struck with a hiss, and power flickered. The lights dimmed. The AI hesitated. She didn't wait. Slamming her fist into the launch switch, she felt the deck rumble beneath her feet. Arcshade's rear thrusters ignited with a roar, lifting off the bay floor in a blaze of white fire. The Sentinel reached out, but too late. The blast washed over it, searing circuits. Then the ship tore free of the dome's grip and hurtled into the stormy sky of the upper stratosphere. Inside the cockpit, Vena gripped the controls, breathing hard. Her hands trembled, but her eyes remained fixed on the stars ahead. She didn't know what waited on Terra 7, only that it had to be better than what she'd left behind. Eira stirred, eyes still half-lidded, and whispered without moving her lips. "They're still coming." Vena didn't answer. She already knew, and this was only the beginning. The stars outside were a blur, streaks of cold light slipping past the battered hull of the Arcshade. Inside, the cockpit was dim, the hum of damaged systems pulsing like a wounded heart. Vena tightened the straps around Eira, checking each one twice. The child didn't flinch, didn't ask questions. She simply stared at the ceiling, listening to something only she could hear. "They launched too," Eira said softly, her voice like an echo in the dark. Vena froze. "Sentinels?" Eira nodded. Vena turned to the console, her fingers flying across the cracked interface. The ship's sensors were weak, burned by their hasty launch, but she could just barely make out the 2 fast-moving signals behind them. Sleek, needle-shaped, running silent. No heat signatures. No comms. Just death. The Sentinel units were built for pursuit. No emotion, no fatigue. A blend of synthetic muscle and alien bioweave, running on Hive Omnis protocols. Once they locked on, they didn't stop. She pushed the throttle forward, sending the arc shade deeper into the upper atmosphere. The engines roared in protest. Vena's jaw clenched. "We won't outrun them," Eira murmured, her voice too calm for a 6-year-old. "But maybe we don't have to." Vena glanced back. "What do you mean?" Eira reached toward the console, not touching it, just hovering her fingers near the data core. The screen flickered, then twisted. Strange glyphs formed, cycling fast. Vena didn't recognize the code, but the ship did. Systems rebalanced. Power surged. Suddenly, the arc shade dipped low, diving into the thick gray clouds hanging above Terra 7. Rain slammed against the hull. Lightning flashed. The tracking signals behind them stuttered. Interference. Eira exhaled. They can't sync with Hive here. Not fully. That meant the Sentinels would rely on last known coordinates. Vena spun the ship hard to starboard, hugging the terrain. Industrial ruins rose beneath them. Abandoned cities and rusted towers half swallowed by time. Terra 7 had been forgotten by most, but now it might just save them. An impact rocked the ship. One Sentinel had caught up, launching a spike that tore through the lower hull. System screamed. The arc shade buckled, alarms blaring. Eira cried out, not in fear, but as if something had pierced her mind directly. Vena forced herself to stay calm. She cut altitude. "We land now. Hide. Regroup." The ship skidded across a stretch of cracked steel, smashing through twisted metal before grinding to a halt in a basin of fog and ash. Silence fell. Vena grabbed Eira and leapt out the rear hatch, her boots sinking into cold dust. The Sentinel howled above them, scanning the wreckage. But they were already gone, slipping into the shadows. The world outside was broken. Vena moved quickly, clutching Eira close as they weaved through the skeletal remains of what had once been a mining outpost. Rusted beams jutted from the ground like ribs of some dead titan. The sky above Terra 7 churned with dark clouds, casting everything in a cold, colorless light. The only sounds were the wind, the crunch of ash beneath her boots, and the low crackle of static leaking from her fractured comlink. She glanced back at the arc shade, now half buried in rubble and smoke. It would never fly again. Eira's breath was shallow against her shoulder. "It's quiet," the child murmured. Vena didn't trust quiet, especially not here. The Sentinel that struck them was still out there, damaged, maybe, but relentless. And without the ship's systems, they had no shield, no sensors, no way to track it. They were prey now, breathing, bleeding, vulnerable. She ducked beneath a collapsed walkway and pushed aside a broken security gate, revealing an old subterranean shaft. The entrance was barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, but inside it was dry and tight, just enough shelter to rest, hide, and think. Vena lit a flare. The glow painted the concrete walls in shifting orange, revealing old signs in a forgotten dialect. The air smelled of oil, rust, and something ancient. She laid Eira down gently on a makeshift pallet of thermal wrap and broken tarp. The girl's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, unblinking. "There are echoes here," Eira whispered. "Like memory, but not mine." Vena frowned. "Can you feel them?" Eira nodded. "The machines here, they used to speak. Now they're quiet, but not gone." Vena leaned against the wall, exhaustion tugging at every fiber of her body. Her hand drifted to the back of her neck, touching the implant scar she had hidden for years. Project Genesis had buried many things, data, people, guilt. Now it was digging them back up. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the last intact device she had left, a portable neurokey core. Just enough power for one deep scan. She hesitated, then placed it near Eira. The core buzzed softly, and the readout flared red. Vena's heart skipped. There was something inside Eira's neural pattern, something she didn't recognize. Not fully human, not fully machine, and not Valari either. But all three. She didn't say a word, just stared at the pulsing light. Somewhere above, far in the night sky, Another sentinel passed overhead. Its shadow crossed the fractured surface of Terra 7 and moved on. For now. By morning, the sky over Terra 7 had turned a deep copper gray, the sun barely visible through the dust-choked clouds. Vena wrapped Eira in an old cloak salvaged from the wreck, hoisted the girl on her back, and began the long trek east, toward the only signal that hadn't gone completely dead. It was faint, erratic, a maintenance ping buried under layers of forgotten satellite code. But she recognized the signature. Kalen Voss. Once, he'd been a prodigy in neural core architecture. Before the war, before the accidents, before he vanished from everything. Some said he was dead. Others believed he'd been decommissioned, code for silenced. But Vena knew better. He was her last chance. The terrain grew harsher as she descended into the remains of an old foundry valley, a maze of corroded steel, piping, and collapsed transit routes. Then, tucked between two cliffs, a structure appeared. Half bunker, half workshop, with smoke curling faintly from a hidden vent. She approached cautiously, hiding Eira beneath a tarp near the ridge. Then she knocked, twice, then once more. No answer. She stepped back, scanned the outer panel, and entered a string of numbers no one had used in years. A click. The door slid halfway open, groaning on rusted tracks. The man inside didn't look up. He was crouched over a broken drone on a makeshift table, goggles down, hands moving with slow precision. His once golden hair, now streaked with gray, tied back. A synthetic brace wrapped one leg. But he still moved like someone who understood machines more than people. "You're not dead," Vena said, stepping into the dusty light. Kalen froze, then slowly stood, turning to face her. "You're late," he muttered. A dry smile tugged at her lips. War broke out. Whole galaxy forgot how to send birthday cards. His gaze sharpened. "Why are you here, Vena?" She hesitated. "I need your help. I'm not that man anymore." She nodded. "Good. Because I'm not asking for the man you were. I'm asking for the one who disappeared, because he knew too much." Outside, Eira stirred beneath the tarp. Kalen's expression shifted. He looked toward the ridge. "There's someone else." Vena's voice softened. "She's complicated." His brow furrowed, but he said nothing. Just limped toward the door, peering out at the fog-covered scrap field. For a long moment, he stood there listening to the wind. Then, almost reluctantly, he reached for his old rifle leaning near the doorframe. A battered Magshard blaster, long thought obsolete. "Bring her in," he said. "But if this is about Project Genesis." He looked over his shoulder, eyes sharper than ever. "You'd better tell me everything." Eira sat quietly on the workbench, her legs dangling over the edge, toes brushing against scattered bolts and wire fragments. The workshop around her smelled of oil, metal, and memory, layers of it soaked into the walls like old smoke. She ran her fingers along the surface of the bench, pausing at every dent, every groove, like she could read its history just by touch. Kalen watched her from across the room. Not with suspicion, exactly, but something close. He'd seen machines pretend to be human. He'd seen humans act like machines. But this girl was neither. Or maybe both. "She doesn't talk much," he muttered, adjusting the sensor array above her head. "That normal?" Vena stood by the doorway, arms crossed, her face unreadable. "She speaks when she has something to say." Kalen grunted. "Sounds like someone I used to know." He powered up the scanner. Lights blinked. Lines of data began to scroll across the monitor beside them. Neural waveforms, cognitive patterns, energy signatures. He leaned closer, then froze. "That can't be right." "What?" Vena asked, stepping forward. Kalen stared at the screen, his voice low. Her brainwaves are syncing with the diagnostic core, not reacting to it, controlling it. Before he could say more, the lights in the room flickered. The scanner sparked, let out a soft chime, and then every console in the workshop shifted. The readouts began rearranging, not in English or Valari script, but in a language that didn't belong to any known system. Glyphs curved like living circuitry, flowing like thought. Eira's eyes were closed. "She's not doing that consciously," Vena said. "It just happens when she's near tech. But it's getting stronger." Kalen looked back at her, his expression tightening. This isn't just tech. That interface protocol, it's hive-rooted. Some of it's organic. Where the hell did you? Vena cut him off. Project Genesis. You remember the theory. Hybridization of human adaptability, Valari neural capacity, and AI processing. Only a theory, right? He blinked. They actually made one. Vena glanced at Eira, then back to him. Not one. They tried 6. Only one survived intact. Eira opened her eyes. For a moment, Kalen swore they weren't just reflecting light, they were emitting it. She knows when people lie, Vena said quietly. She can feel intent. She dreams in code. And sometimes, Kalen waited. Sometimes she hears voices that haven't spoken in years. Silence hung heavy in the workshop. Finally, Kalen exhaled and stepped away from the console. Then we need to move. Because if she's what I think she is. He looked out the small, dust-streaked window toward the black horizon beyond Terra 7. They'll never stop coming. Kalen Voss didn't believe in miracles. He believed in circuits, welds, and failures measured in millimeters. But what he saw in Eira was something no tool or schematic could explain. It started when he powered up the old generator. The lights in his workshop had been flickering ever since the crash. Kalen had rerouted power through a backup coil system, but it wasn't holding. He grumbled under his breath, pulling open a rusted panel and digging into the wiring when the air behind him changed, like the static just before lightning. He turned and saw Eira standing perfectly still, her eyes slightly unfocused, one hand lifted toward the wall. And the lights came on. Everyone. Bright. Stable. Silent. Kalen blinked. Did she touch anything? Vena stood nearby, arms crossed but tense. No. The monitors flared next. Screens that hadn't worked in years suddenly flickered to life. Diagnostic readouts, calibration software, archive scans, all booting simultaneously, as if they recognized her. I didn't teach her that, Vena said, her voice low. Eira lowered her hand. I just asked them. Kalen stared. You asked them? Eira tilted her head. They were asleep. I woke them up. He moved closer, cautiously, and handed her a broken drone core, completely dead, stripped for parts years ago. Can you wake this one? Eira held it between her palms and closed her eyes. The core hummed faintly. Then, to Kalen's astonishment, it spun once, slow but deliberate, before going still. It wasn't just telekinesis. It wasn't electromagnetic control. She was interfacing, with no implants, no cables, no tech. She doesn't just connect, Venus said. She merges, neurals syncing without physical contact. Kalen leaned on the work table, rubbing the back of his neck. That shouldn't be possible, not even for Valari hybrids. She's not a typical hybrid, Venus said. She's the only known tri-hybrid. And something in her mind, it's waking up. At that moment, a low hum reverberated through the walls. A sound Kalen hadn't heard in over a decade. The emergency proximity scanner, long dormant, had activated. It was tracking something. Eira turned her head slowly toward it. I didn't do that, she said. It did on its own. But I hear it too. Kalen stepped over to the console. The screen glitched, then cleared, showing a heat signature approaching from the western ridge. Something large, moving fast. We're not alone anymore, he muttered. Eira said nothing, but her hand reached for the dead drone core again, as if instinctively bracing for what was coming. The old tramline creaked beneath their feet as they made their way through the ruins of an abandoned facility tucked into a ravine outside the valley. Terra 7 had once been home to dozens of scattered research outposts, most of them forgotten, many swallowed by time. But this one Vena remembered all too well. This is where it started, she whispered, running her hand along the cracked wall, its faded logo still barely visible beneath the grime. Substation 9B, Project Genesis Division. Kalen followed closely behind, Magshard blaster slung over his shoulder. Eira walked between them, quiet as ever, her eyes scanning the broken tiles and flickering lights with something between curiosity and caution. Vena bypassed the security panel with a few old command strings. The door stuttered, then opened with a reluctant hiss, releasing a breath of stale, metallic air. Inside, it was a tomb. Desks overturned. Screens shattered. Data cores coated in dust. But deeper in the facility, beneath the ruined lab wing, they found what they were looking for. A cold storage vault still intact. Kalen cracked the outer casing, and the system blinked to life under backup power. 6 canisters lined the back wall, each one labeled with a project ID and status light. 5 red, 1 missing. Vena stepped forward, her voice tight. These were the original 6. 6 tri-hybrid prototypes, Kalen muttered. Only 1 survived. She nodded. The others failed. Either unstable, incompatible, or something worse. Eira stood in front of the missing slot, staring at the empty cradle like it had meaning. Her fingers brushed the edge. "I know their names," she said suddenly. Both adults turned to her. Kieran. Selix. Varn. Lythe. Aura. Her voice was flat, but her eyes shimmered. They dreamed. Then they burned. Vena stepped closer. "How do you know that?" Eira didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward a disconnected terminal in the corner and placed her hand gently on its side. It powered up instantly. A flickering screen displayed old project logs, most corrupted, but a few still readable. Kalen skimmed one, his eyes narrowing. They accelerated neural integration too early. The AI layers couldn't distinguish between host identity and command hierarchy, which means, Vena added, the children were being overridden before they could fully form their sense of self. Kalen exhaled. It wasn't evolution. It was possession. The last file showed the names again, listed with status codes. Kieran rogue. Selix merged with Hive Omnis. Varn terminated. Lythe catatonic. Aura unknown. Subject 6 status active. Eira outside. Thunder rolled low across the horizon. Dust shifted from the ceiling, falling like old ash. "They're calling me back," Eira said softly. Vena knelt beside her. "No, you don't belong to them. You're not a code to be run. But part of me is still listening," Eira whispered. The silence that followed was heavier than fear, because deep down, none of them knew what was truly waking inside her. They left the vault before nightfall, slipping into the shadowed valleys of Terra 7. The storm was moving fast, amber lightning splitting the sky like fractures in glass, casting strange patterns across the rusted earth. Kalen took point, scanning the ridge ahead, while Vena trailed behind, one hand always resting on Eira's shoulder. The girl hadn't spoken since they left Substation 9B. Her expression was distant, as if part of her was still in that frozen room, walking among memories that didn't belong to her. The static came first, a high-pitched whine in Kalen's earpiece. At first he thought it was interference from the storm, until he caught the faint pulse behind it. A signal, encrypted, military-grade, embedded with old Genesis protocol signatures. He stopped cold. "Someone's pinging the satellite grid," he muttered. "Low orbit. Short burst relay. They just gave away our position." Vena's blood turned to ice. No one should know how to access that frequency, except her voice trailed off as she turned toward the ridge. And then she saw him. A man in a sleek, black field cloak stood on the ledge above, one hand raised toward a small comm drone blinking red beside him. His hair was thinner, streaked with age, but the face was unmistakable. Dr. Maylis Core. Vena's breath caught. "You." Core gave her a tired smile, like an old friend apologizing for a debt long overdue. "Vena, I warned you. You should have let her be recycled. Now they'll burn everything to get her back." Kalen raised his blaster. "I ought to put you in the ground for what you did." Core didn't flinch. "You don't have time. Sentinel units are already inbound. You've got maybe 6 minutes." "Why?" Vena demanded. "Why signal them? You helped design these kids." Core's expression hardened. "That was before I saw what she could become. Before I watched Kieran rip a grown man apart without touching him. Before Selix whispered to a reactor and made it implode. She's not like them." Vena shouted. Core's eyes flicked toward Eira. "No, she's worse. Because she's stable. That makes her the most dangerous of all." A distant rumble echoed through the canyon. The sound of approaching engines. Core stepped back into the mist, voice fading. Run, or fight. Either way, she won't be yours much longer. Then he was gone. Eira stood motionless. Her voice was almost inaudible. He still thinks I'm theirs. Vena crouched beside her. He's wrong. But in her heart, she wasn't sure if she believed it. The sky over Terra 7 had turned an ominous green-gray when the Sentinels arrived. Vena spotted the first one just past the ridge, moving like liquid metal over jagged stone, its limbs folding and reforming with every stride. Kalen cursed under his breath, already unpacking his gear on the edge of an abandoned service tunnel. "We've got maybe 2 minutes," he said, throwing down the last of the EMP coils. One clean burst will knock out their neurorelays, but only if they're close enough. Vena scanned the terrain. And the second one? Still circling. It's watching. Waiting. Eira stood near the tunnel entrance, silent but tense, her eyes following the rhythm of the machines without needing to see them. She could feel them, like heat behind her eyes, like pressure building in her skull. Kalen connected the last wire, sweat beading on his brow despite the cold. He turned to Vena. "When I give the signal, get her underground. There's a dead zone below this facility, old magnetic shielding. Should buy us time. And you?" He smirked. "I built the trap. I'll pull the trigger." The first sentinel emerged through the fog like a ghost, sleek, silent, its obsidian shell gleaming with high-voltage circuitry. It paused, sensing the bait. Eira stepped slightly forward, drawing its gaze. Vena reached out instinctively. "Eira, don't." But the girl's voice cut through the wind. "I can hold it." She closed her eyes. The sentinel paused mid-stride, its movements stuttering. The lights in its core began to flicker. Kalen's breath caught. "She's sinking," he whispered. "She's locking into its guidance, subroutines." But the effort was tearing at her. Blood trickled from Eira's nose. Her body trembled. The mental strain of connecting to a full high-voltage unit without shielding was overwhelming. "She can't hold much longer," Vena shouted. "Now!" Kalen triggered the EMP. A thunderous burst of magnetic force exploded outward, collapsing the air into a soundless void. Sparks danced across the sentinel's body. Its limbs froze mid-motion. Then it crashed to the ground, limbs twitching, systems dead. But Eira collapsed too. Vena rushed to her, scooping the girl into her arms. Her skin was ice-cold, her lips pale. She was breathing, but barely. "She pushed too far," Kalen said, kneeling beside them. "Whatever's inside her, it tried to bridge the gap and nearly tore her apart." Eira's eyes fluttered open for just a second. "They're listening," she whispered. "Even when they're dead, they still listen." Then her head fell against Vena's shoulder. Kalen looked to the horizon, where the second sentinel had vanished into the clouds. "We can't keep doing this," he said grimly. "Next time, she may not come back." The shelter Kalen had rigged beneath the tunnel was dark, lined with salvaged insulation and patched with whatever wasn't corroded. The hum of the EMP trap had faded, replaced by silence, too deep, too heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Eira lay curled on a padded cot, her breathing shallow but steady. Vena sat beside her, gently wiping the blood from her nose with a piece of cloth. The child hadn't spoken since the EMP blast. Her body had recovered, but something in her mind had shifted. "She hasn't moved in hours," Vena whispered. Kalen stood nearby, watching a waveform scroll across an old neural scanner. The lines were erratic, layered. Too many rhythms for a single brain. "Because she's not alone in there anymore," he said. Vena looked up, alarmed. "What do you mean?" Kalen hesitated, then turned the scanner toward her. "I ran a deep wave analysis. The cognitive patterns don't just show overload. There are echoes, structured ones, like fragments of other minds. Multiple identities stitched into her neural architecture." Vena's throat tightened. "You think it's the others? The ones that didn't survive?" "Maybe. Maybe just pieces of them, code left behind. Maybe high Vomnus left something in her when she linked." Eira stirred. Her eyes opened, but she didn't look at them. She stared past the ceiling, unfocused. And then she spoke, but it wasn't her voice. He was cold. He saw light, but it wasn't real. He screamed until the walls bled. Vena's breath hitched. "Ooh, who said that?" Eira blinked slowly. Kieran. A shiver rippled through the room. She sat up slowly, as if gravity had lost meaning. Her pupils were dilated, her voice strangely calm. Celix didn't die. She merged. She became silence. She's still watching. Kaelin knelt down beside her. Eira, are they hurting you? No, she said. They're scared. Confused. They're trapped inside me. Or under me. I don't know. Vayna reached out and took her hand. You're still you, sweetheart. No matter what they left behind. Eira turned to look at her, truly focused for the first time. What if I'm not? Vayna froze. What if I'm just the container? The words were too exact. Too adult. Something was speaking through her. The lights in the tunnel flickered. And then, just as quickly, it passed. Eira exhaled, slumping back against the cot. Her expression softened, like a child again. She was exhausted. I don't want to hear them anymore, she whispered. Vayna pulled her into a quiet embrace. Kaelin looked on, haunted, because deep down, he feared the voices weren't just echoes of the past. They were warnings of what Eira was becoming. The coordinates came from a corrupted file Eira decrypted in her sleep. She hadn't spoken when she woke, just reached for Kaelin's console and typed them in, eyes still glazed from whatever dream she hadn't escaped. The data pointed northeast, across the ridge-scarred plains of Terra 7, toward a sector long abandoned and buried beneath decades of sand and silence. They traveled through the ash winds, the terrain growing more warped with each mile. Massive skeletal towers leaned at odd angles, remnants of old relay stations. Rusted drones littered the ground like forgotten insects, half-buried and blind. But it wasn't the environment that made Vayna's skin crawl. It was the way Eira kept pausing, turning her head as if hearing something no one else could. We're close, Eira said softly. He's hurting. At first, Kaelin thought it was another hallucination. Then he saw the footprints, bare, small, unsteady. They led into the remains of an observation post sunk halfway into the ground, its dome shattered and collapsed inward. Inside, the air was unnaturally cold. The wall still buzzed with residual energy, enough to make the hairs on Kaelin's arms rise. They found the boy curled in the corner, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes wide and glowing faintly blue. Kieran. His face was pale, streaked with grime. The moment he saw Eira, he flinched, not from fear, but as if recognizing her from some memory buried too deep to name. Eira knelt in front of him. You don't have to listen to them. Kieran shook his head violently. They're inside. Every second. Every thought. Vayna stepped forward slowly. Who's speaking to you, Kieran? His lips trembled. Celix. And the others. But mostly the hive. His voice changed mid-sentence. Not in pitch, but in presence. A mechanical lilt, like someone or something was using him as a speaker. She was the stabilizer. The bridge. You left her to merge. She sees through your daughter now. Kaelin instinctively raised his weapon. That's not the boy talking. Eira placed a hand on Kieran's chest, and the room pulsed, just once like a skipped heartbeat. The lights dimmed. Kieran gasped, blinking rapidly as if waking from underwater. They use him as a conduit, Eira whispered. He's not fully gone, but the hive has roots in him now. Deep ones. Kieran gripped her hand tightly. Help me shut them out. Please. They never stop whispering. Vayna exchanged a glance with Kaelin. Bringing him along was a risk. A hybrid compromise by hive omnis could be unpredictable, even dangerous. But Eira nodded. He's part of this. Just like me. And just like that, their journey expanded, not just in distance but in consequence. Because if the hive had a foothold in Kieran, it was only a matter of time before it reached deeper into them all. The storm over Terra 7 broke just before dawn. Lightning cracked across the sky, casting the ruins in sharp flashes of white and gray. Vayna, Kaelin, Eira, and the newly found Kieran had taken shelter beneath a collapsed overpass, its steel bones twisted into a jagged mouth of rust. The wind howled through the gaps like a warning too old to matter. Kaelin was calibrating the magnetic shielding he'd cobbled together to keep hive signals out. Kieran sat against the far wall, trembling, his fingers twitching in unnatural patterns. And Eira, silent as ever, stood still, watching the storm. Then she spoke. He's here. The air shifted. Heavy, dense, not physical, but psychic, pressing into their minds like cold fingers searching for weakness. A hum built from the horizon. Low, harmonic, almost beautiful. Until it wasn't. A craft emerged through the ash, sleek, hovering, shaped like a blade, turned sideways. It made no sound. Its surface pulsed with dim red light, and when it settled on the plateau above them, the earth seemed to still in deference. Then the ramp descended. Director Nairos stepped into view. Part flesh, part machine, his form was tall, imposing, and sickeningly precise. One arm was fully synthetic, laced with black alloy veins that pulsed in rhythm with the hive. His eyes, one organic, one artificial, glowed with mirrored hatred and perfect calculation. Vena stood instinctively in front of Eira. Nairos spoke without moving his mouth. The voice echoed inside all their minds. You've taken what belongs to the project. Returned to the wild, broken your purpose. But all things return to their origin, eventually. Kalen raised his Magshard blaster. If you're here to take her, you're walking into the wrong ruin. Nairos didn't flinch. Kalen Voss, you of all people should appreciate design, but you cling to imperfection, to chaos. I call it free will, Kalen snapped. Eira stepped forward, eyes locked on the director. Why are you afraid of me? A flicker, just for a moment. But even Nairo's posture shifted. Because you are unfinished. His voice was tighter now. An anomaly in our equation. You were meant to merge, to lead, but you resist. I'm not yours, Eira said. Her voice didn't shake. You were made for the hive. Nairos hissed aloud this time. You are the capstone of our architecture. Human resilience, Valari cognition, machine precision. You are destiny. No, she said. I'm a choice. And I've already made mine. Nairos raised a hand, and the storm itself seemed to respond. A thunderclap shook the ruins. Kieran collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. You've infected another, Nairos snarled. This ends now. The ramp lit red. A second wave of Sentinel units descended, dropping into the dust like vultures with blades for wings. Kalen looked at Vena. We don't win this by standing still. She nodded, grabbing Kieran's arm and pulling him behind cover. Eira closed her eyes, whispering to herself. Not a prayer, an activation. And from deep within the wreckage, something ancient began to pulse in response. They weren't ready for a fight, but the fight had found them anyway. They ran, not because they were weak, but because the odds had shifted. 6 Sentinel units, fully armed, fully synced, descended into the ruins like surgical blades. Kalen knew one thing with certainty. They wouldn't survive a direct assault. Not here, not now, but there was one place that might give them a fighting chance. Dravik Hollow, Kalen shouted over the wind as they scrambled through the shattered canyon pass. Old Valari mining site. Narrow tunnels. Choke points. Vena's eyes widened. You want to trap them underground? It's the only place where their numbers don't matter. Kieran staggered beside them, still shaken from Nairo's mental assault. Eira held his hand, her expression unreadable. Whatever was awakening inside her, it was holding back for now. By the time they reached the mouth of Dravik Hollow, the sun had vanished beneath the clouds, casting everything into twilight. The entrance was a jagged scar on the cliffside, reinforced by stone and ancient alien alloys. Kalen knew the structure well. He'd studied Valari engineering in his younger years. Their tech wasn't elegant, but it endured. They moved quickly, deeper into the tunnels, setting traps along the way. Kalen rigged magnetic tripwires from gutted mining drones, buried explosive charges beneath fallen debris, and reactivated dormant machinery that could collapse corridors on command. They're not just hunters, he muttered as he worked. They're mirrors. They adapt. We only get one surprise. Vena armed the last charge near the central chamber. Then let's make it count. The moment they reached the core shaft, the Sentinels arrived. 6 of them, their black armor gleaming in the low blue glow of the tunnel lights. Moving in perfect synchronization, silent, coordinated, lethal. The first stepped into the corridor. Snap! The tripwire triggered. releasing a wall of pressurized plasma from an old Valari cutter. The sentinel caught it mid-chest and staggered, armor melting, but didn't fall. The second pushed forward, blade arms deployed, sensors scanning. Now, Kalen yelled. The ceiling above them collapsed in a roar of rock and fire. 2 sentinels were buried beneath tons of debris. A third was torn in half by the blast radius. But the others kept coming. Vena opened fire with a scavenged pulse rifle, strafing the walls to blind their visual tracking. Kalen moved behind the remaining pillars, using a hammer piston rig to knock loose sections of the ancient framework. The whole place shook. They're adapting, Vena shouted. I know. A sentinel leapt across the chamber, straight toward Kieran. And Eira moved. She didn't scream. She didn't blink. She raised her hand, palm open, and the sentinel stopped mid-air. Frozen, trembling. Its limbs spasmed as if fighting itself. Sparks burst from its joints. And then it dropped. Eira collapsed beside it, unconscious but alive. Kalen rushed to her. We're almost through. Only one sentinel remained now. Cautious, calculating. It turned and retreated. They're not retreating, Venus said. They're recalculating. Let them, Kalen growled. We just taught them what flesh can do. The dust hadn't even settled when Eira began to convulse. Vena dropped beside her instantly, cradling her head. Her skin was cold to the touch, her breath shallow and erratic. Tiny sparks danced along her fingertips, flickering like dying stars. She's overheating, Venus said, voice trembling. Her neural pathways, whatever she did to that sentinel, it's frying her from the inside. Kalen knelt beside them, pulling a diagnostic reader from his tool belt. He scanned her vitals, frowning. This isn't just feedback. Something's building inside her, like a charge. Kieran stood at the edge of the chamber, staring wide-eyed. I can hear it too. It's like humming, but not sound. It's thought, pressure. And then the world pulsed. Every piece of metal in the cavern trembled. Lights flickered and bent inward, as if gravity had hiccuped. Even the dust in the air seemed to freeze for a split second before falling again in silence. Eira's eyes snapped open, not glowing, not human, somewhere in between. She didn't scream, didn't speak, but her body lifted off the ground, slowly, gently, as if the laws of physics had agreed to make room for her. Lines of raw energy coursed up her arms and down her spine. Not electricity, not light, something older, something coded into the fabric of what machines used to be, long before humans learned to name them. Kalen backed away. This is the signal, the one she was born to carry. The pulse, Vena whispered. Machines buried deep in the walls began to stir. Ancient Valari tech, dormant for centuries, flickered back to life. A console burst to life in the far corner of the room, symbols flowing across its screen like rivers of code. And outside, miles away, a distant satellite blinked for the first time in decades. The pulse had reached orbit. Eira hovered in the air, eyes wide open, not in pain, in focus. She was reaching out, communicating, rewriting. Kalen watched a deactivated sentinel carcass twitch near the tunnel mouth. Then another. Metal shifted and bent, reconfiguring itself. Not attacking, not hostile, listening. And then submission. Whatever Eira had sent out, it was more than a command. It was a declaration of identity. A frequency the hive hadn't accounted for. Not control, not dominance. Harmony. But it came at a price. Her body dropped like a stone. Vena caught her just in time. Eira's pulse was weak. Her skin burned with fever. She was unconscious again, but something in her had changed. As if pieces of her mind were still scattered across the network she'd just touched. She connected with everything, Vena said softly. And now, she's somewhere else too. Kalen looked toward the tunnel. The hive wouldn't ignore this. The pulse wasn't just a defense. It was a flare. Dusk fell slowly over Dravik Hollow, casting the ravine in a strange amber light. The battle had ended hours ago, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than the noise of war. Dust lingered in the air like memory, refusing to settle. Inside the makeshift shelter beneath the hollow, Eira slept, motionless, wrapped in heat blankets, her breathing thin but steady. Her outburst had changed everything. Machines now reacted to her presence like loyal hounds. The pulse wasn't just a flare. It had recalibrated the battlefield. And now, the world was recalibrating in return. Vena stood alone, just beyond the shelter's edge, her eyes locked on a small black device in her hand. No bigger than a coin, the disc bore a single red light in its center, steady, pulsing alive. A piece of her past. She hadn't told Kalen about it. Not yet. The disc wasn't a weapon or a tracker. It was something worse. A genetic failsafe. Back when Project Genesis was still young, each handler, scientists, engineers, neural architects, was given a key. A strand of code buried deep, capable of deactivating any hybrid tied to their matrix. She had never used hers. Not even during the early days, when Eira's powers were raw, volatile. But now, the director was moving. The hive knew Eira's location. The pulse had painted her like a beacon across the stars. If they captured her, they could override her, turn her into a weapon the galaxy couldn't stop. She heard footsteps behind her. "Kalen, you've been quiet," he said. Vena didn't turn. "I'm tired." He stepped beside her, eyes scanning her face. "You're not just tired. You're deciding." She exhaled. "You know what this is, don't you? I built half the tech in Genesis. I know exactly what that is." They stood in silence. "I would never use it," she said, "unless I had no choice." Kayla nodded. "Problem is, we're running out of choices." Vena finally looked at him. Her voice cracked. "She's my daughter, Kalen. Not a project. Not a protocol." "I know," he said softly, "but the hive doesn't care. To them, she's code to be reclaimed." Vena closed her hand around the failsafe, the light disappearing into her palm. "I'll protect her," she whispered, "even if I have to protect her from myself." Behind them, Eira stirred in her sleep, murmuring something in a voice that wasn't hers. Just a whisper. Aura, a name from the vault, a ghost. And suddenly, Vena wasn't sure who she was protecting or who might be speaking through the girl she once called her own. The entrance to Vault Echelon was hidden beneath a fallen processing plant. Its access shaft collapsed and disguised by time. Only the Valari glyphs etched into the metal door remained untouched, glowing faintly when Eira approached, like they recognized her. Kalen stared at the symbols with a frown. "These aren't human markings. This wasn't built by us." Vena didn't answer. She was too focused, tapping into what remained of the entry panel's neural interface. The system resisted at first, then yielded. The door groaned open, revealing a stairwell that spiraled downward into darkness. As they descended, the temperature dropped. Lights flickered on, one by one, without anyone touching them. Kieran walked beside Eira, staying close. Neither spoke. The final chamber was unlike anything they'd seen. Circular, seamless, no signs of construction, more like the room had been grown, not built. Dozens of consoles lined the walls, floating inches above the floor, humming in harmonic resonance. In the center stood a single monolith, six-sided, smooth and black, with pulsing veins of blue running through its surface. Eira stepped forward. The room responded. The consoles activated instantly, glyphs racing across their surfaces, flowing like language, but alive. Images flickered, holograms of alien cities, star maps, schematics of neural architecture far beyond human understanding. One display caught Kalen's attention. A timeline, but not a human one. The origin point stretched back tens of thousands of years. The Valari had created the first cognitive synthetic interfaces, blending mind with machine, not for control, but for communication. Their early experiments had failed catastrophically, leading to a decision. Their species would not continue the project alone. They reached out. They found us. Project Genesis, Vena whispered. It wasn't our idea. We were recruited. Humanity, it turned out, had never been the sole architect. We were the organic variable, the wild factor the Valari couldn't simulate. We were meant to complete what they started. Not as equals, as instruments. The files went deeper. Images of early trihybrid prototypes. Fusion of human DNA with Valari neuropatterns and hive omnis code. The sixth subject, Eira was different, not because of her power, but because she was conceived, not engineered. She was the only one born from both purpose and accident, the only one with a choice. Then, the monolith pulsed and emitted a sound. Not a tone, a signal. Eira stiffened. Her eyes widened. "It's not just data," she said quietly. "It's a message." "What kind of message?" Kaelin asked. Her voice was distant. A recall command. A pull from something old. "It wants me to come home." Kieran shuddered. "It's from far away. Farther than Terra. 7. Farther than any star I've ever felt." Kaelin stepped forward. "Can we block it?" Eira shook her head. "It's not coming to me. It's waking up inside me." They stood in silence, surrounded by the truth. They weren't just fighting a project gone wrong. They were standing inside a legacy, not their own, and the next chapter had already begun writing itself. They left Vault Echelon before the system could fully reboot. The walls had begun to shift, subtly, groaning as if remembering their original form. Kaelin didn't want to wait around to see what that meant. They camped that night beneath a shattered comms tower. Its bent dish still pointed at the stars. Kieran slept, curled near the fire. Vena sat beside Eira, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. But Eira wasn't asleep. She was listening. "I can hear it clearer now," she murmured, eyes unfocused. "It's not static. It's layered, rhythmic, like breathing." Kaelin looked up from his tools. "The signal." Eira nodded. "It was buried in the Valari systems, dormant, until I touched the monolith. It didn't just wake up. It recognized me." Vena's voice was cautious. "Is it calling to you? Or controlling you?" Eira didn't answer at first. Then, neither. "It's inviting me, like I've always belonged to it, even before I was born." That chilled everyone. Kaelin leaned closer. "Can you trace it?" Eira closed her eyes. The fire flickered, casting shadows that danced in rhythm with her pulse. "Yes, it's coming from outside the sector. A planetary body, unregistered, beyond the old Valari maps. The Hive can't reach it, but I can." She paused. "It's called Alaris Prime." The name felt ancient, heavy with memory, though none of them had heard it before. Even Kieran stirred in his sleep, muttering something unintelligible, his mind echoing signals he couldn't understand. Kaelin exhaled. "We leave soon. We'll need a new vessel. The Arc Shade won't make it." "I'll help build it," Venus said. "But we need to be sure. If we follow that signal, there's no coming back." Eira stood slowly, looking up at the night sky. "I don't think it's about going forward or back," she said quietly. "I think it's about becoming." The stars above shimmered faintly, as if something out there had heard her, as if it had been waiting all along. The next morning, before the others woke, Kaelin was already at work. He stood alone in the skeletal frame of an abandoned shuttle bay nestled deep in the cliffs, just outside the ruins of a collapsed Valari outpost. Dust hung in shafts of pale light filtering through the cracks in the metal ceiling. Time had warped everything here, except for the old bones of a ship no one had dared touch. Until now, the vessel had no name, no identity. It was a prototype from a forgotten war, built for speed, not comfort. But it was intact enough to become something more. Kaelin rolled up his sleeves, fingers coated in grease, sparks dancing around him as he welded new life into the engines. He worked with a fury that surprised even himself. The war-scarred mechanic, once a man who ran from the galaxy, was now racing to meet it head-on. When Vena found him hours later, she didn't interrupt. She stood in silence as Kaelin calibrated the plasma nodes, rerouted the neural input systems, and hardwired new shielding across the ship's underbelly. "You're building it by hand," she finally said. Kaelin didn't look up. "Because no system out here is safe. Not anymore. If I don't know every wire, every bolt, I can't trust it to carry her. She's not just cargo, Kaelin." "I know." He paused. "She's everything." Vena walked around the vessel slowly, taking in the strange fusion of human tech and alien scrap. It shouldn't have flown, and yet with him at the helm, it might. "I've seen a lot of fathers run," she said quietly. "You're the first one I've seen run toward the danger." Kaelin wiped sweat from his brow, finally looking at her. "I can't fight what's coming. Not really. But I can make sure she gets there wherever there is." Vena stepped forward, placed a hand on the unfinished hull. "We'll call it the Warden," she said. Kalen raised an eyebrow. "For her?" he asked. Vena shook her head. "For you." He didn't answer, but something in his chest settled. Later that night, Kalen sat on a ridge above the canyon, staring at the stars. Eira joined him, quiet, her feet bare against the stone. "You're afraid," she said softly. "I'd be stupid not to be," he replied. "You're still building it. Because I'd rather fly into the storm than watch it swallow you." She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The final coordinates were buried inside a corrupted data fragment recovered from Vault Echelon, encrypted, fragmented, and pulsing with residual hive signatures. It took Eira only minutes to decode. They led to a forgotten facility nestled within the northern basin of Terra 7, surrounded by cliffs of black stone and echoing winds. The place was more crypt than laboratory. Its doors still bore the faded insignia of Project Genesis, but everything beyond them had long since been abandoned or buried. Kalen forced the entrance open with a surge of magnetic torque. The air inside was cold, sterile, untouched for years. Lights flickered on as they stepped through the corridor, reacting to Eira's presence like the facility still remembered her. 2 stasis pods stood upright in the final chamber. One was cracked open, its glass smeared with black fluid. The other remained sealed, softly pulsing with life. The one that had escaped was already waiting. A boy, older than Kieran, with sharp, angular features and eyes that didn't blink enough. His voice echoed from the shadows before they even saw him. "I wonder how long it would take you." He stepped into the dim light, movements too precise, too smooth. His name echoed in Eira's mind before he even spoke it. Aura. But this was not the Aura Vena remembered from the files. This one had no fear, no empathy. He tilted his head toward Eira. "You're the last. The one they protected. The one they lied for. Where's the other?" Vena asked, scanning the room. Aura's gaze shifted toward the sealed pod. "She's still inside, but she's not really here anymore." Kalen approached cautiously. Through the glass, they saw the final child, a girl with snow-white hair, floating in suspended animation. Her skin shimmered faintly with hive signatures, pulsing like code. She didn't move, but her presence filled the room. "She let them in," Aura said. "Hive omnis." She stopped fighting. "Now she is them." "You resisted," Iris said softly. He smiled faintly. "I didn't resist. I redirected. I'll let the hive speak through me, but only on my terms." Kalen didn't like the way he said that. Aura stepped closer to Eira. "We were designed to be more than human. But you were born with choice. That makes you dangerous. That makes you wrong." Vena reached for her weapon. "Back away from her." Aura stopped, smiling coldly. "You'll see soon enough. The signal's already pulling us in. We'll all meet again on Alaris Prime. There, you'll finally understand your place in the sequence." And just like that, he vanished, retreating into the dark halls beyond. They didn't pursue. Inside the sealed pod, the final child's eyes flickered open for a split second. No words, no expression, just silence. The warden stood ready. What had once been a gutted skeleton of a warship was now reborn, its thrusters patched with alien alloys, its control core laced with Valari code, and its shielding reinforced by Kalen's hands and sleepless nights. The launch platform trembled under its weight, held together by rusted clamps and raw determination. Eira stood at the top of the loading ramp, her eyes fixed on the sky. The signal was louder now, not in volume, but in presence, like a gravity that didn't pull on flesh, but on memory. Alaris Prime was calling. Kieran boarded first, clutching a data crystal containing what little remained of Selex's mind. He hadn't spoken much since Vault Echelon. Whatever he'd felt when he met Aura had rattled him deep. He didn't say it, but they all knew. Not every child made by Genesis would make it to the end. Vena ran one last systems check as Kalen powered up the engines. The warden hummed a life. Not sleek, not beautiful, but strong. A shipment not for conquest, but survival. "Stratosphere's clear," Kalen muttered. "One burst, and we're off this rock." Vena paused at the ramp, turning for one last look at Terra 7, the broken world that had sheltered them, scarred them, and in many ways defined them. This place was never meant to be home, she said quietly. No calendriplaith. It was a proving ground. As they ascended, the launch pad buckled behind them. Flame and dust swallowed the valley below. Sentinel wreckage, hive-burned facilities, fractured stone, it all fell away. Eira stood on the bridge, watching the stars rush past. Then, without warning, her hands gripped the console. Something's wrong. Kaelin turned. What do you mean? She didn't look at him. The signal, it shifted. Kieran stepped beside her, face pale. It's not pulling us toward Alaris. Vena checked the trajectory. No, it is. We're still on course. Eira shook her head. No, we're on a path they've prepared. Everything, from a vault to the final coordinates, was planted. A trail, and we followed it. Silence fell across the cockpit. A trap? Kaelin asked. Eira didn't answer immediately. Then she whispered, or a test. Ahead of them, the stars parted, revealing a dark celestial mass hanging in space. Alaris Prime, and whatever waited there, was already watching. Alaris Prime was not what they expected. From orbit, it looked like a shattered pearl, smooth in some places, fractured in others, with glowing veins of blue light that pulsed like the heartbeat of something ancient and still very much alive. The warden trembled as it entered the atmosphere, as if the planet itself resisted being touched. They landed in silence. The terrain was bizarre. Jagged formations twisted in impossible angles, as if gravity had forgotten its purpose. Mountains floated sideways. Trees grew in loops. Light didn't behave as it should. Shadows bent against the sun, and sometimes things moved before they were touched. This place is wrong, Kaelin muttered, hand on his Magshard blaster. No, Eira said, stepping off the ramp. It's not wrong. It's disconnected. From time. From rules. Vena stayed close, scanning the environment. There were no signs of life. No birds, no insects, no wind. But the energy readings were off the charts. It was like the planet breathed through its crust. As they moved deeper into the crystalline basin that stretched toward the horizon, Eira began to slow. She paused near a mirrored stone jutting out from the ground. At first, she simply stared at it. Then she stepped forward and touched it, and the world around her changed. Not physically, but perceptually. Tumbin just slow. It folded. She was still standing there. And yet she wasn't. She was elsewhere. She saw herself. Dozens of versions. One Eira stood alone on Terra, 7, covered in ash, eyes cold. Another walked beside Aura, wearing hive markings, her body enhanced with silver plating. One floated above a battlefield, arms outstretched, machines kneeling beneath her like worshippers. And one lay still, buried beneath twisted metal and fire. Each version blinked in and out like ghost reflections in broken glass, echoes of possibilities, fragments of paths she hadn't taken or hadn't taken yet. She backed away, breath caught in her throat. The stone flickered and went dark. Vena rushed to her. What happened? Eira looked up, shaken. They're me. All of them. Different versions. Different timelines. You saw the future? No. I saw options. Choices I might make. Some terrifying. Kaelin crouched beside them. Are they real? Eira shook her head. They're not here to scare me. They're warnings. This place doesn't obey time. It remembers everything that could have happened and shows you the weight of it. Kieran stood nearby, pale. Then what is this planet? Eira turned toward the horizon. It's not a battlefield. It's a mirror. She didn't explain further. Because somewhere out there, beyond the twisting landscape and broken geometry, was the final convergence point. The place where all paths would collapse into one. And Eira knew that whatever decision waited for her at the end would shape more than her own future. It would define the future of every mind like hers, hybrid, human, or otherwise. Beyond the mirrored valley, the terrain gave way to something far more engineered. Massive hexagonal platforms hovered in midair, spinning slowly above canyons that seemed to drop into infinity. Towers jutted out of floating islands, each one lit with crimson or blue pulses that throbbed in rhythmic conflict. The closer they walked, the more the air changed, charged alive. It wasn't wind. It was intent. Eira knew before she saw them. "They're already here," she said. Kalen raised his blaster. Ooh, but he didn't need an answer. From the upper tiers of the platforms, figures began to emerge, each one different, yet somehow familiar. Hybrids, dozens of them, some bearing the clear marks of hive-omnis enhancement, gleaming implants, neural ports, armor fused to flesh. Others had Valari features, elongated limbs, glowing eyes, speechless mouths that communicated only in pulses of energy. And at their center was Aura. He stood tall, arms folded behind his back, expression unreadable. "I told you we'd meet again," he called across the void. His voice didn't echo. It resonated, rippling through the platforms like code. "You led them here," Venus said through gritted teeth. "No," he replied calmly. "I gathered them. This was always meant to happen." Behind him, the hybrids stood still, not as soldiers, but as rivals. Eira stepped forward. "You want to fight for control?" Aura nodded. "We're all expressions of the same algorithm, Eira. But the hive can't function with conflict inside. One mind must emerge above the rest. One purpose, one voice. That voice will guide the next evolution of thought." "And what if I don't want to be part of that?" she asked. He smiled. "Then you'll be erased by it." With a sharp hand motion, the battle began. The platforms lit up with pulsing symbols, triggering bridges of light and pathways between the floating islands. Hybrids leapt, clashed, surged forward. Energy crackled across the sky. No words, no screams, just the fury of competing identities tearing at one another in silence. Kalen fired into the chaos, holding a flank with Vena. Kieran ducked behind cover, trying to project interference through neural waves, but he was overwhelmed almost instantly. The sheer pressure of so many hybrid minds in one place, it felt like drowning in thought. Eira moved calmly, walking toward the center as the world fractured around her. She wasn't fighting. She was listening. Each hybrid that passed her sent a pulse. Rage, sorrow, fear, hunger. It wasn't about dominance. It was about recognition. They all wanted to be seen, and they all feared the same thing, being forgotten. Aura landed before her, breathless but defiant. His armor flickered, cracked, skin beneath pulsing with light. "You won't stop this," he said. "I don't want to," she replied. He blinked. "Then what are you doing?" Eira placed her hand on the ground. A soft wave rippled outward, not destructive, not forceful. A signal, the pulse. Machines froze. Hybrids halted mid-blow. Even the floating platforms paused in mid-spin. "I'm offering something different," she said. "Not hierarchy, harmony. A network where no one leads, and no one has to vanish." Aura trembled. "That's chaos." "No," she said softly. "That's humanity." Somewhere behind her, a hybrid dropped their weapon. Then another, and another. Not all, not yet, but enough. The war hadn't ended in fire. It had hesitated in doubt, and that hesitation cracked the hive's foundation. The battlefield quieted, but the silence was not peace. It was pressure. The pulse had disrupted the flow of conflict, but it hadn't decided anything. Suspended above the central platform, a massive construct began to descend, a floating ring of black stone and flickering light, pulsing in time with Eira's heartbeat. It was ancient, Valari in design, but riddled with hive modifications. A voice filled the sky, not Aura's, not any of the hybrids. It was deeper, older, the hive root. Candidate recognized. Cognitive convergence acceptable. Final interface available. Do you accept integration? Eira stood still, windless and weightless. Her body didn't move, but her mind felt like it was being pulled in every direction. Every timeline, every choice, every version of herself she had seen on Alaire's Prime. If you accept, you will become the singularity of identity. The hive will unify beneath your mind. Conflict will end. A throne formed in the center of the ring, simple, smooth, and terrifying in its stillness. It wasn't built for comfort. It was built for containment. Vena called from the edge of the platform. Eira, don't listen. But Eira couldn't hear her anymore, not fully. She saw what the hive was offering. Peace. Total harmony. No more fear. No more violence between fractured identities. She could guide them, reshape them. She wouldn't just be queen, she would be core. And to do it, she would have to give up everything. Her body, her family, herself. She looked down at her hands, then across the platform to where Kalen stood. He was bruised, bleeding, exhausted, but his eyes held something no signal could replicate. Love. And that was the difference. The hive didn't understand love. It calculated bonds, measured loyalty, simulated attachment, but it didn't feel. It didn't know what it meant to hold someone in silence when they were breaking. It didn't know what it cost to choose someone even when it made no sense. Eira stepped forward. The platform beneath her feet lit up. The throne responded. The hive began flooding her mind with data, images of galaxies, networks, futures she could shape. It begged her in patterns and pulses, promising she could heal what Genesis broke. She paused inches from the seat. Then she whispered no, and stepped back. The light dimmed. The rings stuttered. Choice declined. Consensus fractured. Instability imminent. Aura dropped to his knees, clutching his head. Other hybrids collapsed, stunned by the hive's confusion. Eira turned away from the throne and ran toward her parents. Kalen caught her in his arms as the structure above began to shudder, its once perfect symmetry twisting into chaos. You chose us, he whispered. I chose me, she replied, and I'm not theirs. Behind them, the hive construct began to collapse, not from damage, but from doubt. And doubt, once planted, was a virus the hive could never control. The hive didn't scream, it simply broke. Like glass under pressure, its collective will fractured into 1,000 silent cracks. The pulse had given them doubt. Eira's rejection had given them choice. But even then, the core of the system, the hive root, remained intact, struggling to recalibrate. Instability detected. Core convergence interrupted. Structural collapse imminent. Across the battlefield, hybrids stood frozen, flickering between identities. Some wept, some simply shut down. Aura knelt with his hands pressed to the ground, caught between rebellion and loyalty, staring blankly as the world around him splintered. At the center of it all, the hive's throne, still unclaimed, began to fold in on itself, drawing energy from everything nearby. Gravity distorted. Metal peeled upward. The sky above twisted into a vortex of neural static. It tried to reset, Venus said, eyes wide. It's rewriting the field, wiping us all to zero. Kalen didn't hesitate. He stepped forward. Kalen, no, Venus said, grabbing his arm. We can still run. There's time. No, there's not, he said quietly. That thing's not just collapsing, it's broadcasting. If it completes this cycle, the hive won't just restart here. It'll rewrite every hybrid mind connected to it across the stars. He turned to Eira, including her. She shook her head, tears forming. There has to be another way. There is, he said, smiling. Me? From his coat, Kalen pulled a small neural spike, jury-rig tech, unstable, illegal in every civilized system. He'd built it during the early days of Genesis, in case one of the prototypes ever went rogue. Now he'd use it for something else. A direct emotional burst, he explained. No code, no algorithm, just one thing the hive can't mimic. What? Eira whispered. He looked her in the eyes. Love. Before they could stop him, Kalen sprinted toward the collapsing throne. Light seared around him, and the ground fractured beneath his feet. But he didn't slow. He reached the core and jammed the spike into his neck. A pulse erupted, blinding, golden, and impossibly warm. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was memory. Images, emotions, sensations. Holding a newborn for the first time, hearing a voice in the dark, and knowing you weren't alone. Fixing something broken not because you had to, but because someone needed you. The hive felt it all, and it couldn't process it. The throne exploded outward in a wave of pure signal disruption. Hybrids collapsed across the field, not dead but released. Their eyes opened, clear for the first time. Aura gasped like someone coming up for air. And then it was over. The platform calmed. The light dimmed. The hive was gone. Only Kalen wasn't. Eira rushed to the center, falling to her knees where he had stood. There was no body, just the neural spike, still glowing faintly with the last echo of his choice. Vena fell beside her, arms around her daughter, holding her tightly as the sky above began to clear. "He saved us," Eira whispered. "Not with weapons, not with power, just by feeling." And that, more than any signal, any code, any design, was something the hive could never conquer. Silence fell over Eira's prime. Not the sterile silence of death or the void, but something gentler. The kind of stillness that follows a storm, when everything broken begins to breathe again. Eira stood at the edge of the fractured platform where her father had vanished, the neural spike still faintly humming in her hand. She no longer cried. There were no tears left. What remained was a quiet, heavy understanding. He had given her more than life. He had given her the power to choose what to do with it. Behind her, the survivors of the hive war gathered. Some tri-hybrids like her, others fully machine, a few once-human minds finally freed from subjugation. Confused, disoriented, but alive. And waiting. They didn't look to Vena. They didn't look to any elder. They looked to Eira. She stepped forward, the wind stirring her hair, her voice steady though young. "We're not tools. Not code. Not fragments of something old and broken." She looked at her palm, where the pulse still shimmered, now quiet but never truly gone. "We're something new, and we get to decide what that means." Her words didn't spark cheers, but they brought stillness. And in that stillness, something fragile and real took root. In the days that followed, Eira and Vena led the rebuilding, not of an empire, but of a sanctuary, a place for those like them. Hybrids, refugees, minds set free. They didn't call it a nation. They called it the Haven Collective. Vena repurposed fragments of old Valari tech, building homes that responded to thought and emotion. Eira reprogrammed a shard of the hive core, not for control, but as a guardian, a reminder of what they had survived. The planet bloomed slowly, not with forests or cities, but with laughter, with new languages and new ideas. With uncertainty, yes, but also with hope. Some nights, Eira would sit alone under the stars listening, not with her ears, but with the deeper part of her that had once connected to everything. Sometimes, in the quiet, she swore she could feel her father still watching. Not as code, not as energy, but as warmth, as memory, as love undying. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If this story made you feel something, even just a little, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or sharing it with someone you love. More stories are on the way, and I'll be right here, ready to tell the next one whenever you're ready to.